All right, Frank, go ahead and ask your question.
What happens to our
That you've created. Uh, Now, it depends also on what you believe. So, if you have a desire, for instance, to smoke cigarettes, then that's one desire that another realm, another dimension, something like heaven or uh, something like Swarg, cannot provide. It's very related to material related to the earth. So it will tie you back down to this plane. So that can lead to reincarnation, to another incarnation to resolve this energy that hasn't been resolved yet. If you spend a lot of time worrying about name or fame, then that's another thing that will tie you down to this dimension, this material plane. Man, a lot of the time, Earth, because souls tend to have a desire to work out their energies related to a certain planet. But there are plenty of souls who go to other planets, even this universe, or in reincarnation. But um, you can also have resolved your desires and your fears, and and if you have achieved a certain level of resolution, you've conquered your desires and fears to a certain degree, you can move on to a higher dimension, a higher astral dimension, and it really depends on what beliefs you have spiritually or religiously. If you believe in heaven, then you can move on to heaven for a certain amount of time. If you've reached enlightenment completely to a certain degree to where you won't have to return to earth, you can be in heaven for um, you could say forever, but really there's different levels of heaven. Even in the Bible, there's different levels of heaven, and you get closer and closer to God. And I believe ultimately you will merge with God. If you if you believe in you know if you believe in the dimensions that I believe in, you'll go to something that's similar to heaven, but it's more related to continuing work on your consciousness. And if I've resolved enough desires and fears that I've basically sown the seeds of in this life, then I can move on to higher dimensions. But I don't think I will. I think I will be reincarnated because there's still a lot of energies related to the earth, related to fears and desires that I have not worked through yet. So I'll have to work through them before I can really move on to a higher dimension. So it's very important to try and resolve fears and desires, get rid of both really, and really understand yourself as a soul, not necessarily yourself as a body, because the Mother Earth loans us these bodies for a certain amount of time. Every atom is just on loan for our soul to exist in or in relation to, and to emit consciousness to varying degrees of illusion. So if you have one degree of consciousness that still is shrouded by illusion, Maya, to a certain extent, then your soul will not be as crisp. It will not be able to project itself completely into this world, and it will not be able to, you know, project itself completely into another dimension. It's all about getting rid of those shrouds of darkness, of tamas, of rajas, these negative energies, and trying to first cultivate sattva, but then getting beyond duality, working towards ultimate virtue, ultimate good, ultimate realization, moksha. Um, Now, when it comes to somebody who does a lot of terrible things, like really evil stuff, let's say you kill a bunch of people and you feel no remorse, you didn't even try to work past your desire to kill, then you can go down to somewhere like hell or Narg. Um, Narg is more of a place of darkness and fire, but I mean, hell in the Christian sense does exist as well. It just depends on your beliefs, and your beliefs kind of attach themselves to your soul until you're completely rid of the need for beliefs. So that will determine where you go to. And if you go to hell or Narg, you will go there for a certain amount of time to burn off your sin, burn off all these evil things you've done and the energies attached to them, and then you'll rise up to this planet again and for another shot. At least that's what I believe. Now, it's very hard to say how many lives any soul lives. We're very much attached to material at the beginning. We start out as minerals and even gases and things that are basically inert with little consciousness. And then we go to the animal kingdom after how many millions of incarnations, and then we go to the human kingdom. And and then you go to higher beings, and higher beings that maybe exist in Brahma Loka. Now, you can, of course, fall down from what you attained if you choose evil, incorrect action, unskillful action. Do you have any questions based on what I've just said, or do you want me to continue? Like, what comes to your mind when you're thinking about consciousness? Because consciousness for me is very connected to the soul, and it's about your connection to your soul and the degrees of connection. As far as you're focused, it does go through an attuning process after you die, and that consciousness that you have, it goes through this process depending on what the consciousness did and observed and was a part of during life. But anyway, do you have any questions based on what I've just said, or?
So you have to burn off negative energy?
Yeah. In this world, we can get rid of it. And if you have enough negative energy, you'll naturally just fall down to lower dimensions. So do you have any ideas about what you associate with, what happens after death to the consciousness? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, you can look at it as from whatever perspective. Most people will look at it with some kind of mechanics to it.
More like a natural mechanical process kind of thing.
You're reborn into the world, or out of the world.
Yeah.
You were born into it. You're born out of it.
So there has to be a process, right? Yes. Yeah. Is there anything that you've read that would give you a hint about the process, or like, for instance, in the Bible, there's certain ideas about the process. We have the idea of the angel of death or the reaper kind of either guiding you or dragging you somewhere. Do you think that negative entities can that aren't necessarily just death, but also can drag you to hell? Do you believe in that?
I was going to ask. Is there a way, if you don't have, what happens if you don't have any negative energies?
If you don't have any negative energies, then you'll be light. It's kind of like there's not all this negative, dark energy that kind of drags your soul down. Your soul's just free from all that negativity, so you can rise up and really spread your wings, because all the negative desires, fears, carelessness, recklessness, no pity, no mercy for other human beings and life. All these things are really heavy in essence for the soul, and they cover the soul in all these false ideas and illusions to where it kind of drags it down to lower dimensions. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
But if you don't have those, then you can rise up pretty easy. Do you think that there's different levels of heaven? I know you believe in heaven. Do you think there's different levels, or do you think there's just one?
Sure. No. Yeah, of course. There'll be
varying degrees.
Yeah, there'll be different. Well, I was wondering. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It would be interesting. I'm sure maybe there is.
Yeah. Anything's possible. I don't like I say all the time, I don't really know anything.
It wouldn't matter.
It's my best guess.
If you're in heaven, even if you're the least person in heaven, it would be the greatest. It would be the greatest of something because you're in heaven.
Yeah, better to serve in heaven than to rule in hell, basically. Because just naturally being in a place like heaven, it's a pleasant experience. It's not something that it's not a place where any being can really suffer. Whereas in hell, in contrast, it's a very terrible experience. Positive experience in higher dimensions, and negative experience in lower dimensions. Like I said in the Bible, serving in heaven, it's not like backbreaking labor. It's more your attunement to God and trust in God, and trying to work towards Him by getting rid of whatever ego you have left. How big of a role do you think ego has to play? Is there anything that you've read that kind of tells you that pride and ego cannot exist beside God, or beside God, or?
I don't know if it's God doesn't like pridefulness.
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense too, because you're really nothing in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping there's a place, another higher dimension.
Yeah.
But I can see it work both ways. There'd be a lower dimension, a higher dimension. What's true of one would be right, the opposite of.
Yeah, as above, so below.
Yeah.
Kind of idea. When we truly find that part of ourself that is beyond pride, beyond ego, beyond all of those selfish layers of material illusion we experience on Earth. When we get past that, we start to see that we are kind of like a cup of water traveling. First we're kind of dropped onto this Earth through clouds, and then we kind of travel in a stream through this world, and then different people might evaporate more quickly and go back up, and some people have to exist in this ocean of material that is all the galaxies and universes, and then those people can also kind of evaporate and become lighter, become less bound by the chemicals or heaviness of materiality, and then get back to heaven. Well, hello there, sir. We didn't let really too many people know about that we were going to live stream, so we don't expect a big crowd tonight. But this is very interesting subject matter. I think I've done videos about this before, and but it's more than I can cover in just one video. Now, do you have any of those other questions associated with this that you'd like to ask? So we got a couple of subtopics over there. Can you read? Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about voidism.
Well, I mean, we can get into voidism.
You want to get into voidism?
But there's a couple of subtopics over there beside the main topic we're talking about.
Okay, which one are we on?
I can read one of them. What do you think will happen to you? So what do you think will happen to you, Frank, first, and then I'll answer for me. So, like, do you have an idea of what will happen to you, or do you have any fears of what will happen to you?
Yeah, it's fear. I feel it's like drowning.
Yes. A lot of the time when we have a lot of uncertainty as to the nature of ourself, or we haven't introspected enough, which I haven't introspected enough either. We still have these fears of what'll happen to us after death, what will happen to our consciousness, this thing that we're using right now, what will happen to it when we're just taken out of the world that we feel like we've always existed in, because we can't remember our other lives yet. So it's a very natural and human fear. Now, this fear itself can actually be a negative thing that can drag us down as well. But and it's another question we have over there: is it different for everybody based on belief? And it really is, but whatever kind of illusion allows your soul to travel more easily. And this might seem weird, but a lot of people who have had hell in their hearts their whole lives, they really can't exist. They can't exist anywhere but hell for a time. And in a sense, they want to exist there because it makes sense to them that mercy doesn't exist, that love doesn't exist, that only punishment and pain is what the world is. So they're just dragged down to it because that's what makes sense to them. If your heart is light and you see order, Ishwara is a term we use for the Lord of Order and aspect of God, or God himself in Hinduism. But if you believe in order, if you believe in peace, if you believe in something that is beyond selfish desire, then you'll likely have your soul being attracted towards a heaven or a swarg, or for instance, Haranya Loka, which is a dimension that Paramahansa Yogananda's master described as going to after Earth, because it's very hard for people to follow him in this world, because he had very strict regulations on your spiritual path about what you need to do. He asked a lot of his devotees, so he went to Haranya Loka, in the astral realm, a planet where beings of higher spiritual evolution existed, and he went to go guide them in that place after guiding them on Earth. Now, we have this awareness of our consciousness, but we don't understand it completely. We think of seeing, speaking, hearing, smelling. We consider that as intrinsical parts to our consciousness. So if these intrinsical parts do not go with us, then how do we sense anything after we die? Well, we still sense, but there are subtler senses behind the gross senses that we use in the material world. We use these gross senses to interact with our environment on Earth, but all of the senses have subtler forms that we become attuned to after the material body drops off. So we can still feel pain, we can still see, we can still smell, we can still experience our environment. Um, it just becomes far subtler, far less gross. And even in the hellish realms, in the hellish dimensions, you have these subtler senses. And let's say you're burning in hell, if you believe in hell like that, and you think that's a type of punishment. You will have those subtler senses, but as far as size goes, you won't necessarily be the same size. It's more about your spiritual energy up to that point traveling down or traveling up and experiencing beyond size, beyond space, beyond time. It's just a sequence of events for your consciousness, for your soul, once you go up or down. Here, everything's very cut and dry. We experience space, we experience time, but when the senses are far subtler, it's all about events. Like you suffer this day, you suffer the next day, you suffer the next day, or you experience greater communion with God this day, and this day. And really, these experiences become the days. Time doesn't exist as we know it in other dimensions. Now, what I will start talking about in future videos is voidism. And voidism is basically I've written a whole book that I haven't gotten published yet because it's been hard, but voidism is basically a code that encourages one to work towards their own idea of virtue. I like to think of virtue as the different sides of a gem. This is how the Greeks thought of virtue: the different sides of a gem that are all part of the same gem, and then there's the same core, but they're all different. They're all different, faces on this gem. Now, when it well, before I continue, how to get rid of bad days very immediately is what Alak Ranjan, which I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, which I probably am. How to get rid of bad days very immediately. It's not necessarily about affecting your external world. It's about affecting your internal perception of it and looking for solutions that are not attached to extreme emotions. Looking at your life from a third-person point of view, and that is where you work off from. Looking at your life from a third-person point of view, and then being able to pursue solutions that aren't inhibited by emotion. So, like if I'm have a bad breakup with my girlfriend, for instance, then there's going to be a lot of emotion attached. And it's like, okay, how do I get rid of these constant thoughts I have about her, and how do I move on to another relationship? Well, you must first take apart the part of yourself, take apart the illusions that you need her in your reality in order to continue on. Once you realize that reality can exist without her, even though you're very much attached to her in a spiritual way, your spirit, then the emotions will slide off, will go away, and then you can move forward. Correct pronunciation. That's good. Then you can move forward without the pains of the illusions that you needed that person in your reality. So it's all about looking at yourself without without the terrible emotions that really hold us back in life. These emotions that we attach to how we live are either very positive or very negative a lot of the time, because this world is Rajasic. It's very active between good and evil. So we have a lot of fluctuations in emotions between tamas and sattva. The rajas is in between, acting. So it feels good when we're in a relationship. But then when we have a bad breakup, we drag down to tamas and we feel this inactivity of, oh, I just can't go on. But you can. You just have to have a level head and then look at your reality. Now, continuing with voidism. Like I said, the different faces of the gem, and at the center is this. So what is at the center of this gem, and all the different virtues are the different faces? At the center of this gem is basically, you can say God, you can say the grander consciousness, the grander whole that we're all a part of. And every virtue, if you go through all the different facets of the gem, they all lead towards that one whole, and that experience, not only just knowledge of that one whole, but the experience of that one whole that all virtues lead towards. So I like to think of virtue like that. So in the book, where I'm talking about Voidism, which is the code, a guide to inner perseverance. I basically talk about how we're all working through different virtues that we choose in order to get to the center. Now, Voidism is also about, now you need knowledge, you need spiritual experience, you need freedom in order to work through the virtues that you choose. So it's about supporting a free exchange of knowledge. If there's a place where certain religions or knowledge isn't allowed, it's about in that society supporting a freedom of both press, information, different books, different religions, allowing everyone to really look through the paths of their options so that they can progress without the fear of being arrested or being harmed by society. Putting people in a place to where they can have access to knowledge and can use it to really find themselves, whatever they choose, whether it's religious, spiritual, or none of the above, just atheism. Having access to that knowledge allows people to advance in a way that progresses their consciousness. Now, it's also Buddhism's, the way that I've coined it, is also about protecting these people that want to find themselves, both emotionally, intellectually, physically, and allowing a free forum. So I'll be talking about Voidism in future videos to come. But back to what happens to consciousness after death. So any questions you have about Voidism or the consciousness after death?
Well, I mean, not really. I can just ask you, what do you think? Do you dream?
Yes, and...
Do you have dreams?
Oh, a lot. Like a lot. And it's said that the subconscious is speaking to you through dreams. And if you don't really dream or you don't remember any of your dreams, it's usually because the subconscious is kind of given up on trying to tell you stuff. Your subconscious is like, okay, well, I give up. He's not interpreting or listening to any of the dreams. So
does it mean anything that, I mean, when you dream, you feel like you're not sure if it's the difference between, like, right in your dreams, you never question, well, is this real?
Yeah. And that really speaks to the natural pliability of consciousness, is because in dreams we have all our senses. They're just all kinds of crazy stuff is happening around us. So really, it's just our mind playing with different ideas and our subconscious trying to communicate what we need to work through, or what it's trying to tell us, maybe even from higher sources, going through our subconscious and going into our dreams. And of course, when we're not dreaming, we're basically with God, kind of in the resting point with God. But the dreams are really what a lot of the times what higher powers and our subconscious are trying to tell us. But there's some dreams that just don't mean anything. Like Sigmund Freud said, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything. But there is an importance to trying to have a dream journal, track your dreams, trying to figure out where your consciousness, the subconscious part of it, is trying to lead you, and maybe trying to figure out where God is trying to lead you, if you believe that God filters himself through dreams. I think it's a great platform for your mind to play with different ideas with itself and trying to understand the whole and yourself. I have crazy dreams on a regular basis, and I always have this one dream a lot of the time, and I know what it means, I'm pretty sure. But it's actually stopped in recent months, but for many years I had this dream where I'd be eaten by zombies, where like I just kept on being eaten by zombies, or I'd act like I was infected and be one of the zombies and I'd be fine, or I'd become a zombie after getting bit and then become one of the zombies that are just devouring other people. But I really felt the pain of getting eaten in these dreams. It was just very crisp, very bright. And that has to do with schizophrenia as well, I think. But I've stopped having those dreams recently because I reached a point where in my dream I was conscious enough to be like, okay, running doesn't work, so I'm going to fight. And once I started fighting, that's when the dreams become less prevalent. And then I realized that the zombies actually represented being overwhelmed by society, and I felt like society was trying to force me down its paths that I didn't want to follow. That society was trying to make me conform and assimilate. And once I really realized that, once I acknowledged that what my subconscious was trying to tell me, then I stopped having those dreams as much, and I had more control in those dreams. And now I'm not afraid of being assimilated by society because I realize my subconscious, like, to fear it is actually to become it. So don't be afraid, and society can have less power over you. Do you have dreams?
Yes,
You
but I'm not sure. I mean, if I can't.
Sometimes they don't mean anything. In fairness,
I can't, confirm 100% if they're real or if they're not.
like, what do you mean? Like, if they're
I
actual,
can tell
like,
you that
messages?
I've never had a real dream because that wouldn't be true. So,
Yeah,
but I'm not sure.
do you have vague memories of dreams?
I mean, it's like, yeah, no, exactly. It feels just like dreams that I had 10, 20 years ago.
There's some vague memories.
I mean, like childhood memories I remember.
Yeah, but dreams you don't really remember.
Dreams I remember.
You do remember?
Yes.
Like, do you have any reoccurring dreams?
No.
No. Yeah, sometimes they're sporadic.
I think that sometimes it's a recurring dream, but
see, you're not like at full consciousness in dreams, and like your fears and desires are a lot of time pronounced, and it's very similar to actually your consciousness when you die. Your fears and desires can be very pronounced. That's why it's so important. You really work on resolving them here and now.
So yeah, in dreams I've had the ability of flying. I think that I've had that sensation, that sense of flying, being lost, unsure.
Yeah, I feel like flying in dreams it's very symbolic, and it's like a lot of time we're afraid because we have all this power to fly, and then once we realize that there's nothing to be afraid of, we just spread our wings, and that's very similar to both consciousness and spirituality. Is that just try not to be afraid, but look with both compassion and logic, and then if you use that as your guiding star in your life, your dreams, and whatever, then and that's what that's a lot of what voidism is, but I'll go into that in future videos. But if you have the compassion and logic within yourself, and use those as your guiding lights, like headlights down any path, then you will never be led astray down a bad path, because you'll be able to both realize that either path is illogical or uncompassionate. If it's illogical, it doesn't make any sense, but your heart's attracted to it, then it can still be valid, but you have to be careful with other zealots within that path. Now, if your mind your logic is attracted to it, but your heart isn't, then that's a very dangerous path, because to live without compassion or mercy in your heart, and you're following a path like that can really destroy your progress in spirituality. It can lead you down some very left-hand paths, extremely chaotic, but your mind might be attracted to it, about gaining power for yourself, about really hoarding all of these desires and fears and not trying to work past them. And then there's a lot of paths on the left-hand side that basically describes. Now, not all gods are good. So most gods are. Now, good and bad aren't necessarily like what most people believe, but there is a positive and a negative. If a path has a lot of compassion, the gods and the spirits will have compassion for you, and it's described by those on a higher level in that path to be that you will experience compassion, and you do, then you're obviously on the right track. If they say, okay, power is everything, and they associate with spirits or gods that are all about power, not about love, then that's when you know that there will be no mercy and compassion for your spirit and soul. So either you just never mess up, and if you do mess up in that path, then you have a lot of danger for suffering, or you always do the right thing and you can still be betrayed anyway, because it's all about power, and another person along that path will try to take your own. So use compassion and logic as your guiding star. Try to find a path that your consciousness really attunes to naturally, and there will be a lot of understandings about what happens after death once you go down a path far enough. I know in Hinduism, I've learned a lot about what happens after death, which I've been describing right now by reading different Hindu texts and meditation, and really getting close to the Divine Mother Kali Ma, which gave me an image of where I'm going to go after I die, which is just a wonderful place that I'll learn and experience light and love, and then I'll come back here. But this place is not really about desire. It's a place where that Divine Mother Kali Ma showed me. It's a place of learning. It's a place of light. It's a place of light. It's a place of love. And I was lucky to receive that vision. Not everybody gets a vision from their God or their higher power. And then the Divine Mother Kali Ma is how I worship and acknowledge the grander whole, but the grander whole that we're all part of, but God. And that's what really took away a lot of the fear that I had about where I'm going to go when I die, where my conscious, what would happen in my consciousness is when the Divine Mother Kali Ma kind of gave me that vision. And I have very little fear now, which is amazing because fear of death, fear of pain, it hinders your consciousness so much. I'll answer a few more questions and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up because this video is getting over 30 minutes. So if we die, how will we feel pain in hell? Okay, if we die and we go to hell for a time, and I believe it's temporary before we get another chance, the pain is related to your subtler senses, because you lose your gross senses. So you have all the same senses, but they're subtler, and they're described as being able to see through the ear or smell through the eyes. Like all your senses are kind of combined in this mishmash, and they can all sense. Every sense has the ability to link to the other senses in a way that we don't experience in the material universes. So all the pain and agony will be very much related to affecting those subtler senses. That's how we will feel pain if we go to hell after we die. If you go to heaven, then the same is true, but your subtler senses will be very much attuned with the feeling, the good feelings that you can experience in heaven. It's not about doing everything you love doing here in heaven. In a heaven, I believe in Swarugan, of course, higher dimensions in the astral realm and causal realm, then you reach God. But it's about honing your consciousness, getting closer to your soul, realizing you're part of the whole. This is what happens in higher dimensions, in heavens, and feeling a level of connection that you will just never feel on Earth for the vast majority of people. Now, let me answer another one. From when you are following Hinduism and what happened to your mind get listened to? Well, I started following Hinduism, like I said before, because I started researching religions at a very young age, 8 years old. Fell off the path for a while, then got back on, and I started to see the logic and the compassion and the vast amount of information in Hinduism about the different realms, about different gurus, about different gods, and once I started soaking in all this information in Hindu texts, I started to realize this is a path that's meant for me. All this makes sense. Nobody actually got me on this path. Nobody said, okay, this is what you should do. And there was never really any introduction to Hinduism besides me just doing research. And then I started doing these spiritual practices, mantras, meditation, offerings. And then I felt more and more at home with myself. And I started to realize this is a great path. This is where I'm supposed to go. Okay. Last question I'll answer that's on here is, who is your favorite god? The Divine Mother Kali Ma. And I'd say Odin comes after. And in a different way, Shiv, but the Divine Mother Kali Ma for sure. But anyway, let's end it there. This has been a video about what happens to your consciousness after you die, and a lot of other random topics, obviously. But I hope you enjoyed this. Feel free to hit that like button if you like this video at all. If you want to subscribe to my channel, I greatly appreciate it. I try to get to every comment made on my videos. And if you want to support me on Patreon, feel free to go to www.patreon.com/darkrealist, capital D, capital R. And then you'll find my page. I just ask for $1 a month for access to videos that I don't place on YouTube. And you'll get access to also some of the things that I write. So just $1 a month can get you that. I'd greatly appreciate any donations. And thank you for saying I'm knowledgeable. I like to think that I'm working on my knowledge at any rate. And you can type in Hunter Salazar on Patreon as well, www.patreon.com, and you'll probably find me. Now, I will not answer any questions, but maybe I can get this one out. If all cells are changing their body when they die, how and why is much population increased from where is? Okay, where do the souls come from? Why is our population increasing? Now, I'll answer this briefly. There's a soul behind everything. So minerals, animals, and the lower dimensions. Sometimes it's not hell that they're all coming up from. Sometimes it's just more subdued dimensions that souls are slowly progressing in and going into this world. So the population is increasing because souls are working their way up. And when a lot of people die, that eventually somebody will be born, a bunch of people will be born somewhere else, or they'll be in different dimensions for a while, higher or lower, and then they'll come back to the material universe. But anyway, there's a whole bunch of videos that I've made about that. But thank you very much for watching. I hope all of you enjoyed this video, and please support me on Patreon, just $1 a month. And I will see all of you in the future. All of you. Have a great day. Okay, we got a bunch of, I tried to answer all the questions I was seeing.